Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to What Women Want with Judy Goss and Kristin West, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to What Women Want Talk Radio. Thank you for joining us for our show tonight, An Evening with David Ault. I'm broadcasting from New York, and my co-host, Kristin West, is sitting in our gorgeous studio with a view of the palm trees, so jealous, at LA Talk Radio.
Hey, Judy, how are you? Not all palm trees, though. We've got some nice sycamores and other kinds of trees here, but there are some palm trees, yes.
Oh, I'm just jealous because I never see them in New York unless someone texts pictures of them to me. So, What Women Want has reached over 1 million downloads, so we're very proud of that since we first hit the airwaves 4 years ago. Between latalkradio.com's archives, iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, and all over social media, you can find us everywhere. So listen to those replays and subscribe to us on YouTube. We're taking sponsors for our shows for the next few months, so email us for a complete deck through our website, whatwomenwantradio.com. Design and Print Resource is our sponsor for tonight's segment, so thank you so much. Everyone buys printing in some form, so the company you can trust for great service is Design and Print Resource. Gloria Strayer, who has a great story herself, by the way, growing up in California. She's a founder and owner of Design and Print Resource in Anaheim, California, and has been in the print industry for 40 years. Her services also include warehousing and distribution, so give them a call at 714-687-9200 or go to dnpresource.com. Now, I can't wait to bring on David Ault. I have a passion, Kristin, I think you know this, and a little bit of an obsession of picking apart where religion and spirituality intersect and how we can find and strengthen our inner selves. I feel like we're always on the quest for people like David to clue us in, right, Kristin?
Certainly. And I think we're always looking for ways to feel more whole more than anything else. I think sometimes we have beliefs that don't allow us to feel like we're a whole person sometimes. Or a part of us is missing or not validated.
And that's usually, the part is usually from within, right? Our subconscious or from within somewhere.
Right. I think, a lot of times people have sort of a myopic view of where they are in the cosmic drama, and they only see what's really right in front of them. And I think David's going to help us kind of shake up some of those perceptions this evening.
That's right. I want to know a few things. I have like a million questions to ask him. 86,000, I think I came up with on Twitter. I want to give a shout out to Jane Madigan, who's superstar of a pop singer she's managing. His name is Norwood, and he's touring Europe this summer on his Tour de Fierce for Gay Pride in Europe. And if it weren't for Jane, I wouldn't have met David. So I'm thrilled he's on the show. I'm so grateful to Jane Madigan and Norwood. Love him. Good luck to you. We're sending good vibes and prayers out to that fantastic duo who's traveling around Europe, fulfilling both of their dreams. Now, my background does not come from music, but from the high fashion modeling world. I was with Ford New York, and after that, I was a magazine editor, which led me to hosting and reporting regularly for Better TV, City Buzz, all the TV networks around the country, both regional and national. And I'm currently a regular contributor on NBC and Fox. I'm hosting the show Behind the Gates and having so much fun with it. At the moment, it's a luxury real estate show airing on AWE. And we've been combing New York City for jaw-dropping residences. It's been so much fun. I founded the company What Women Want Networking 7 years ago, and we're hosting our second National Women's Conference, October 19th through the 21st at the Hyatt Regency in Atlanta. And I'm also a St. Martin's Press author and the mom of teenage twin girls. So if you want to meet me in person, or my co-host Kristin, or maybe you want to rub shoulders with Amy Newmark, who's the opening keynote for us in Atlanta. She's the CEO of Chicken Soup for the Soul. What powerful women we're going to have there. So you can join us, and the website is whatwomenwantconf.com. Last year was our first conference, and women from 13 states and Canada attended, along with speakers from all around the country, including David Baer. And we're honored that he's coming back to keynote again this year. And Cecilia Lank, CEO of Value Setters, she's our closing keynote. Women for One's Kelly McNellis is hosting a stop on our Truth Teller Tour. Catherine Marshall from Simple Fat Burn will be there speaking, and a whole mix of celebrities, VIP, and some surprise guests too. So grab your spot at whatwomenwantconf.com because we will sell this baby out. I'm so excited. All right, I'm talking so much about myself. Promise you I'm not a narcissist. I do have a co-host, Kristin. Your show, Horror Talk with Kristin West, continues to take off. You're going to be adding another award-winning venture to your resume soon, I can see.
Yes, we're going to be at Action on Film and Hollywood Dreams mega event in Las Vegas in late August. I don't have the screening time and date just yet, but I know it's probably the last week of August. And it's very exciting for us because we're actually going to see the show for the first time up on a big screen with Tony Moran, the original Michael Myers. It's going to be that episode that screens at that event. And also the screenplay I co-wrote with Ariana Wolf, which has strong spiritual themes. Likeness is also competing at the screenplay competition for Action on Film this year as well. And we also have new promo art for Horror Talk with Kristin West as well. And I'm hoping we have some more exciting announcements coming up. We're already planning that second season.
Wow, I know, I saw that. It's like a big poster with all of your film festivals that you're in and, you know, sponsors and everything. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, Judy, you've shown me so much. Each and every week I learn something from our great guests, and I learned something from you, and really being part of this show week after week gave me the courage to branch out and have my own little horror talk show. And I can't wait till you come back to Los Angeles again, because we're definitely going to have you co-host some of these great episodes with us.
Well, be careful what you say, because I'm coming back in 4 weeks.
I know. I've got to get it together. I got to get it together, Judy.
Yeah, you better get ready for me. Okay, let's bring on David. David Ault has been a prophetic voice in the human potential movement as an unwavering crusader for mindfulness, global literacy, and social justice for 3 decades. He's a theologian, best-selling author, a leadership trainer and coach, along with running Kaleidoscope Child Foundation, a global nonprofit that advances vulnerable children and their families with free education, life skills, and fresh water. David's foundation currently serves more than 1,000 children in Cambodia, India, Guatemala, and stateside. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Oh my gosh, it's great to have you. You know, you don't know this, but you and I have a parallel. I grew up in a yes, imagine that. I grew up in a really religious household when I was younger. My father was a minister, and I read somewhere that this was a similar experience to yours. I felt like it was being forced on me all through my childhood, and this is my story, but for me, it was actually a good thing in the end, because I went to study other religions, and eventually, over the decades, came around to the conclusion that being spiritual resonated with me most. And I read somewhere that was similar to your experience. Is that right?
Yeah, I grew up in a very traditional fundamentalist background in Texas, and I, at the time, didn't know anything differently. You know, as you're growing up, you both said myopic, and that's exactly what that experience was. But evolutionary and natural is that part of us that once we start to listen and something doesn't feel right, we can take that discontent and put action to it. And my action was a little messy. It was just get out of there. But once I did, I was able to make myself available to new strategies and new awarenesses. And I credit a lot of that because my very first teacher was a woman by the name of Louise Hay. And I met her very early on in her career and traveled with her for many years. And then she went on to be a huge global influence for a lot of people's spiritual entry point. And one of the things that she taught me was to not dismiss or regret where we came from, but honor it, because it was that discontent that actually forced us into new territories.
And she's been a great influence on my life also. I love how you say it's right at that point where people, it's pivotal in people's lives, which way they're going in the spiritual path. So I have so many questions after reading your background. You've just have so much knowledge and experience and so many different things. I know Kristin has questions too. I want to start with your book, The Grass is Greener Right Here. We Are What We See.
Mm-hmm.
I would love you to explain that. I see a millionaire every day in the mirror, but my bank account balance doesn't show that, so I'm not sure exactly. We are what we see. It's tough sometimes to define that, isn't it?
Yeah, my whole methodology in working with people and what I believe, and I always preface it by saying, take what works for you and what doesn't, feel free to discard. But I operate from the idea that everything that we desire and everything that we aim for and hunger for already exists. And so it isn't so much about going and learning something or going and getting something, but it's about removing all of the known and unknown, conscious and unconscious barriers to that thing that we have built up or accepted. And so worthiness, for example, is not something that you and I go out and earn. It's something that we accept as an inherent quality within us.
That's a good point. And that leads me into a question that someone answered on Facebook. Jane Bishop, she's the founder of Take the Next Step. And she's also an emotional intelligence expert. And I really respect her thoughts and what she has to say. And her question was, what are common blocks people discover preventing them from seeing with their mind? I think that's such a great question because you kind of just did bring that up just now.
Right. I think one of the largest obstacles is comparison. And so we have a tendency to take that physical energy of just being limited by sight, sound, smell, and touch, and looking at all of those things and then being bombarded by media, advertising, and a world that tells us that who we are isn't enough. And then when we look at advertising, when we succumb to all of those external visuals, then we live in a world that tells us that we have to strive for that thing. And it's not bad to have goals. I mean, we all, it's not even bad or wrong to want or to desire, because we are evolutionary by our very core. But it's about understanding that that thing isn't out there, and everything has its origin. All change and shift has its origin in a thought, not in a physical thing, but in a thought. And if I don't change the thought, or if I don't recognize the thought that is prohibiting me from experiencing what I desire, then I'll just keep rearranging things outward, and I'll just keep moving things on the external, and I'll just keep buying things, or I'll just keep attending workshops and following people without really pausing and stopping to look at what is my thought, what is my theme. Because if my internal theme is I'm not enough, then it doesn't matter how much money I spend and where I go. As long as that theme is still in there, then that becomes my predominant recurring experience. And so a theme to me is those habitual, revisited thoughts. And again, so much of that's unconscious. But that's the beauty of mindfulness, and that's the beauty of becoming discontented. That's the beauty of reaching a breaking point, is that it makes us self-examine and go, what am I thinking? What is it that I keep revisiting? What's my default system? Mm-hmm. What upsets me? What triggers me? What do I continuously worry about? And when I can really sit down and have an honest examination of those things, I can guarantee you through journaling or revisiting of that, we will start to see a lot of those commonalities, and we can begin to dissect them and understand that just because I accepted them or just because I live by them doesn't mean that I can't rearrange and change them.
I have a question, because I
Sure.
I do believe in the power of thought, but one of the things that I always worry about is where is the heart's place in all of this? Because the heart sort of has a language of its own sometimes. And I think sometimes our mind and our heart are not in alignment for whatever reason. So where is the heart's place in this?
That's great. Yeah, great question. I actually believe that the heart and the mind are synonymous. When I talk about mind or when I talk about thought, I'm talking about consciousness, and consciousness lives in that sense of the global heart or the awakened heart, and it's the thing that brings feeling to everything. It's like I was reading your stuff, and it was talking about the difference between religion and spirituality. I think religion is like a frame, but spirituality is the passion that was required or that was accessed to create the art that's inside of it. So kind of like
the letter of the law being religion, and the spirit of the law being the spirituality itself.
Yeah, it's like religion is the noun and spirituality is the verb, and without that, it's like faith without works is dead. So faith can be the frame, but the works, the application of that is the thing that brings it to life. And so there can be a thought, there can be an affirmation, and it can be very sterile, but what brings it to life is the heart or the passion or the feeling that I have around that. And that doesn't really get ignited until I continue to revisit it and meet it and turn to it with regularity and devotion.
So, I'm interested in people of faith myself. I grew up with ancestors who were nuns, and my mother actually has a master's in pastoral administration. So I've spent a fair amount of time around theology.
So all of us come from that background.
Yes. So I've spent a fair amount of time around theologians and theology school, although I don't have any sort of formal training in it, particularly myself, besides, being confirmed Catholic and questing ever since. But what's your biggest spiritual challenge?
Embodiment, consistent, total embodiment of what it is that I profess to know. And so it's one thing to live in the intellect, and it's another thing to cultivate a sense of knowing. And my job as a minister or advisor or a counselor is not enough to disseminate information or lines from a textbook, but one of the things I often say is that people would rather see a sermon than hear one.
True.
So how do I live that principle? How do I show up in the world and not just become a sideline critic for the things that are going on that I oppose, but walk up to that thing and go, there's a solution here, and it's my opportunity to dig deep and find it.
Well, a lot of people say they do want to dig deeper and find that and be more a part of being, quote unquote, spiritual. And I'd be curious to see your answer. A lot of women come up to me with my company and say that they want to tune in more effectively, to their gut, to the universe, whatever it is they feel like that would guide them, better. What do you say to someone like that a first step would be to do?
I think the first step is to embrace recognition and to understand or at least consider the idea that the thing that they're wanting already does exist. Just a quick story. Years ago, I was walking the Camino de Santiago, which is that ancient pilgrimage across the country of Spain. And I had some spiritual advisors and mentors that were so happy that I was going to do this. And they said, "Oh my God, you're going to die many deaths." And I was like, "Oh, goody." I just didn't know that all those deaths would happen in the first day. And it was climbing the Pyrenees on the first day and starting at the base of France and then crossing over and then landing into Spain. And it was one of the most challenging, difficult days ever. And one of the things that made it so challenging was comparing myself to everyone else, because we were all pilgrims on this journey, and we're told that there's only so many beds at the end of the evening, and whoever gets there gets a bed. And so I'm not looking at these people as fellow pilgrims and people on this awakening journey. I'm looking at them as bed stealers.
Oh, no.
And so, I'm totally not present to the fact that I'm crossing over the Pyrenees. And it isn't until it dawns on me, halfway over that, through all the struggle and all the comparisons, that whatever I need is going to be there in some form or fashion. The solution that I desire already exists. My only job is to be as present as possible to what is in front of me, to pause and to stop and to look around and to appreciate it. And in that, I set the course for that to meet me more swiftly and less pain. And so for all of those people that are asking, how do I become more in tune with the universe? Well, the universe is already here. Everything that the universe provides is already here. Our solution already exists. So every single day becomes an opportunity to live from that. And that's what mindfulness is. I don't just reserve that for when I'm in crisis. I do that devotionally. The way in which I move into a place of knowing that that's true is I become devoted to that. It becomes my life's path rather than just something that I entertain. So a lot of people, what I find is they're really interested in all of this, but they haven't moved into being invested in it.
I think investment is a great word, because you really have to give something, whether it's your time, your talent, your passion, your attention, to something to receive something in return. And I love that you brought up the life path. At what point, after leaving your background in Texas, being raised in a fundamentalist household, and then finding Louise Hay, at what point were you like, I need to minister to other people. I need to show other people the way. What was that moment for you, or was it a collection of moments?
I think it was a collection of moments. I know there are a lot of people who say I had a calling. Mine wasn't really a calling. It was, I loved to learn, and I was so curious about things. And I actually lived in Los Angeles for more than 25, 26 years and was an actor by profession. And I, through mutual friends, met Louise again very early on and ended up assisting her in music and sound. And then when she began to get notoriety, she was gracious enough to take me and some friends with her, and we were sort of an opening act with her. And I just observed her. I just watched her, and I listened, and I thought, I want to know more about what she's talking about. I want to know more about energy and mindfulness and consciousness. And so I just started taking classes only because I love to learn, not because I wanted to be a minister. And over a long period of time, the more deeper that I dived into it, the more it became something valuable, and the entertainment industry for me became less important, which was surprising because I thought my whole life would be devoted to that. And then it showed me that everything is malleable and changeable, and so it was just a natural progression that the more that I did that, I ended up getting a degree, and I just started doing it full time as a profession. And now I offer it here in Atlanta, where I'm stationed.
My experience has been sometimes when people come from backgrounds that they find challenging, whether it be a Christian fundamentalist household that maybe doesn't allow someone their full spiritual expression, or what Judy experienced where she felt that religion was forced on her, or even experiences I've had. Sometimes it's very easy and tempting to just kind of write the whole background or experience of it off and just not really look at it. Like, okay, that's not who I am now. That's not influencing me anymore. Is there anything from your from your childhood and being raised in that environment that you've still kept with you in your spiritual journey and moving forward?
Oh, sure. I have to actually thank Louise for that, because I used to complain just constantly about where I came from. And I would remember I would be up for big parts and things like that, and I was always the second person. And I remember one time just mouthing off unconsciously, and I said, if I had been raised differently, maybe I would be more successful. And she just kind of laughed and chuckled at me, and she said, honey, you've got to honor the entirety of your journey, because all of that propelled you and got you to where you are. And so I look at that time, and I can appreciate the concept of devotion. I can appreciate the concept of a loving God, which wasn't always the message that was taught, but it gave me the opportunity to really honor that foundation and understand that had I not had that, perhaps I wouldn't be as deeply rooted as I feel that I am today.
I agree with that. I mean, like I said, we come from parallel backgrounds as far as the religious upbringing, and it sounds like Kristin did also. And throughout the years, I didn't have someone to tell me that earlier on, but learned it, through the years with myself, and finally, decades later, because I left the religious, part of me when I left the house to go to college. That was it. I was so, done with the choir and youth group and church, waking up early for the 8 o'clock service. It was just, and it was strange because it was such a part of me and I loved it. But as soon as I didn't have to do it, I didn't do it for many, many years, and came back around to, other things, studying Buddhism and just all kinds of different religions and quests for, I guess, trying to know myself better. But I did come full circle around and studied Judaism, of course, and I realized for me that, we all worship, the spirit, a God. It's kind of, I feel like sometimes when we say to people, we're all worshiping the same thing, and we're all grateful for ourselves, and it's all coming from within, and there is this spiritual presence that we're all talking about the same thing. And it's just a little confusing for me, that people do have religions and rules, and you're talking about comparison early on in the show, and I'm sure you don't have an answer for this, but it just confuses me why there are so many different religions that are almost, competing with each other and against each other when we're all kind of talking about the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm. And I used to look at all of that too and question and wonder, and I'm getting to a place now where and this is a new thing that I've been teaching a lot, is that I can champion something without having to defeat something. So I can champion where I'm at in my spiritual evolution without having to make any other religion or process wrong. I can just be observational about it. And so for me, that which is God or intelligence or source, to me, it's formless, and yet it manifests in infinite forms. And I've looked at all of that and decided that however one finds what it is that they need, then that's appropriate for them. And as they continue doing that, and as they get what it is that they need, then they might move forward. And I even look at where I'm at and I say, is this the end of the road for me? And I go, I hope not. I hope that I always have beginner's mind. And I hope that everything is a stop along the way to something that is infinite and far beyond anything that I might even understand today. I love the idea that there are people who will be major influencers in my life that I haven't even met yet. And that excites me, because that allows me to always have that beginner's mind as I move forward. I can appreciate and dive deep into everything, and hopefully everybody is gleaning and gathering what it is that they need.
I love that idea of the beginner's mind and the amount of optimism that gives you. I think so many people are actually maybe even going through a dark night of the soul and don't even realize it or don't have the tools to deal with it. Do you think
Sure.
do you think that beginner's mind is key to moving past something like a dark night of the soul?
I think it's essential, and I work with so many people now who are in crisis fatigue, who look at the situations that are going on, and I say the only thing that I can offer you that I feel is of stability and substance is this particular statement, and it's even in the apparent absence of. So I make them repeat that over and over, even in the apparent absence of. So even in the apparent absence of peace, there is peace. Even in the apparent absence of love, there is love. So what's my responsibility as a conscious being? It's to look for that unwaveringly, even in its apparent absence. And when I look at all of the situations that are going on and the children and how it's hurting so many people's hearts, and rightly so, I have to look at that on a daily basis, and I go, even in the apparent absence of harmony, there's harmony here. So what is my responsibility? My responsibility is not to just sit and condemn on social media. It's to take action, and it's to go and uncover that harmony, or to bring that harmony, or to bring that solution in my action.
I'm glad you brought up. I'm glad you brought up children, and I'm glad you brought up some of the events that are going on right now, because one of the things with religion and spirituality is, there's that term cradle Catholic, or you're born into a religion and you're taught that religion. And with what happened with the Parkland shooting, and just now today, there was an executive order to finally, reunite the parents and the children at the border. What do children need most now, from your perspective as a minister and a person advocating higher consciousness?
Every child and the child within us as adults needs to be seen, heard, and valued. It's one of the reasons why I started my foundation. 15 years ago, I was in Cambodia, and I had an experience that changed my life, and I decided that I would devote my life to giving and offering whatever it was that I could, whatever it was appropriate, for as long as I was on the planet. And I think part of that came from just a childhood that was not ideal, a child that was abusive, a child that had poverty, that so many people come from. But, in Cambodia, when we were there so long ago, I had 15 people that were traveling with me, and they were just doing spiritual sites. And back then, the conditions were really, really really bad. There was such a delineation between the haves and the have-nots. And the haves were the tourists, and the have-nots were the locals. And around that time, it had not been too long since Princess Diana and her last initiative to excavate the landmines that were dismembering people. And so there was a lot of dismemberment, and there was a lot of starvation and hunger. And so the people that were traveling with me said, we need to do something. And that's a natural response. It's a natural empathic response. And I went to our guide and I said, these people would like to help. I have a request. I want you to take us to the greatest need. And he looked at me kind of strange. And I said, I know it's a one-off. I know that these people are going to go back home, but I want them to see as much as they can and understand the conditions that are going on here. So long story short, he said, I'm going to take you to the Tonle Sap Lake, which is the largest waterway in that part of Asia. And he said in the dry season, all of the refugees, all of the transients, all of the orphans, all of the landmine victims, they all congregate there because they have no other place to go. And if I were you, I would find a way to feed the children there because they're starving. And I said, how do I do that? And we made a plan, and I went back to the group and I said, here's our opportunity. Do you want to do this? And they said, yes. And so as a group, we ended up buying out 3 local markets worth of food. By local markets, I'm meaning it's the indigenous food that those locals harvest themselves and sell. And we bought 3 markets full, and when I went to pay for it, it was $86.
Oh my gosh.
And that was my moment. I mean, that was the moment where I just stood there looking at the dirt on the ground, and I said, you've got to be kidding me. These people have nothing, and for $86, even though I know it's a one-off, I know it's just a one-time thing, it's still something. And so I leased a fleet of vans, and we took all of this down to the lake, and this was fun. This was long before the rampant use of cell phones, and the guide says, you can't just show up there, you got to let me get a message to the matriarch of the village. So even a refugee village has a matriarch. And I still don't know how he did it, but by the time we arrived and we started to unload, there were at least 100 children that were sitting uniformed in this dry riverbed waiting very patiently. And we started to distribute all of this food, and that order lasted for about 8 minutes, and then off in the distance, 100 more children started storming and running towards us, and then it became this free-for-all. And when everything was distributed, we all kind of stood there, and we all were breathing really hard, and we looked down, and we were all covered with these muddy handprints, and from them grabbing for everything. And I could feel, I guess people call it the ugly cry. I could feel it coming on, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I didn't feel comfortable in doing it in front of those people. And I remember I crawled on my hands and knees into this smelly pontoon boat that was tied up on the lake, and I just began to wail. And it was this primal crying. But the odd thing about it was it wasn't out of pity. It wasn't out of sorrow. It was as if I through those children, I met some aspect of my child, the child that had been neglected, the child that was starving, the child that went through all of that. And I just made a vow that I would come back. And over the years, long stories, I made lots of mistakes and had lots of wins. But eventually, I have 2 campuses now in Cambodia, and we offer free education and life skills and computer training, and we provide fresh water to their families and in the surrounding villages. And it took a long time to do all of that, but that's what the child needs. That's what any tribe of children need, is they need to know that they're valued. And my concern and the work that I have to do on a daily basis is that the message that we send to the kids at Parkland or any other school or these refugee children is that they don't matter, that they're not valued. And so my work and my job is, what solution can I bring to that? So my foundation serves as many children globally as possible, centrally from the fundamental message that they matter.
I think that's a very beautiful story and a very beautiful message, especially in the times that we're living in, where the zeitgeist of our current situation seems to be, there's no empathy for anyone for any reason. And I think that's beautiful, that the work that you are doing. Now, I want to know, because I know Judy's a parent. I'm not a parent, but I know that there are many parents listening. How do we teach our children to see the world in a way that is spiritual but not necessarily dogmatic, in the way that you speak?
In a compassionate way.
In a compassionate way, the way that you see the world.
Through conversation. Conversation leads to connection. And the conversation has to be, or at least I feel that it should be structured in a way that nothing's taboo, nothing's wrong. I often, when I'm working with them, even if I feel that they're missing the point or missing the mark, I say, tell me more. Help me understand what it is that you're feeling. And I think that as parents and with children, it's important that we consistently and faithfully and devotedly work at creating a connection where feelings can be expressed without being judged.
And I think that's not just with kids too. And
Yeah.
you know, with Jane Bishop earlier on, I read you her question. You know, she's that kind of person. She encourages conversation, and we've had a lot of stimulating, motivating conversations between us. And I do think that's the beginning of it, is that we bring up things that you know, and you're a thought leader, and that we bring up things that are thought provoking, and that we can, you know, kind of, I guess, start championing the cause for, right? It's just
Sure.
Yeah, it's
Because
the foundation.
The wounds that exist in all of us adults are the wounds that we will continue to inflict upon the next generation if we don't break the cycle. And I came across this amazing, sobering African proverb, and it said, "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." And I just remember going, wow, because my interpretation of that is that the child who feels neglected, the child who is starved for connection, will find it in other ways, and sometimes that connection will be not in the most positive way. It will override any kind of love just in order to feel connected. And so, how do we teach that connection, and how do we give them that fundamental conversation and that energy of being seen and valued right off the bat, so that they can replicate that for future generations?
I love this comment, because I think of every young person who has perpetrated an act of violence, a school shooting against their school, or against a church, or whatever that act of violence is. And there's been a big debate, and I know, Judy, you and I have talked about this before, about how these events are covered. And I think so many young people, even with the glut of social media we have, even with how connected we are and how much media there is out there, some young people feel absolutely invisible, and then they act out in these terrifying and horrific ways. And I think that speaks to that proverb that you cited.
I think that everything has its yin and yang. Everything has its polarity, and I think social media does a lot of good, and I also think that it promotes a lot of laziness. And so we can look at the world situations, and we can point fingers and put inflammatory rhetoric towards all of it and not do anything. And I like to tell people or instruct either my students or anybody, and I say, step back for a moment, pause before you respond, and ask yourself, why do you feel the need to do that?
Right.
And is it coming from an elevated place? And is it coming from a solution-driven place? Because if you really want to jump high in consciousness, you can ask yourself, what must be going on within that person? What theme must be there in order for them to do what it is that they do, or to troll the way that they troll? What must be missing from their life? It's not within my bandwidth to be able to go and fix it directly for them, but I certainly don't have to participate in that.
It's true.
And I can do, mindfully or prayerfully, I can do whatever I need to do in order to continue, like I said, even in the apparent absence of connection, I'm willing to be that which is the connector in all of this from a positive space.
I think what you're speaking to also is that we lack at times discernment skills because information is so readily available that we have not been able to discern not necessarily right from wrong, but good from bad. But we're in a space of reactivity constantly, and therefore there's no room for even any kind of discernment whatsoever.
Or absorption, even sometimes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You had
my great Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, David, please.
I was just going to say today, my great niece. Well, last week she graduated from high school, and she's a diver. And I've never gotten the chance to see her dive in person, but she always posts the videos. And I was watching her, and I noticed that every single time she gets up there, she pauses, and then she steps back, and then she has this breathing thing, and then she dives. And there's this preparation about that. And I was struck by the fact that we would all be served well if we stepped back and we breathed and we prepared before we dove into anything. Because without that, then we sort of just fall off of a high dive and get into all kinds of trouble. But when we're very deliberate about it, when we're very mindful about it, then it can benefit, and it can be a thing of beauty if we allow it to be.
I love that thought. And it was amazing that you had the opportunity through the videos to really observe it over time. Now, I know that some people would be excited to see you in person, and you're based out of Atlanta. You have a spiritual living center in Atlanta. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. I'm a part of a global organization called Centers for Spiritual Living. And so I am the senior minister here in Atlanta, but I also travel extensively with my foundation, and so I'm kind of all over the place.
And Kristin is speaking for What Women Want chapter, our Buckhead chapter in Atlanta this month, aren't you, David?
Well, aren't they lucky?
On the 27th, I believe.
I believe my date is July. I think it's July.
Oh, it's July. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that is exciting. Well, that's going to be a lucky audience to get to see you in person. And you also do many events throughout the country as well. You go to different conferences and such. Where can people see you if they're not necessarily in Atlanta?
Hold on one second. I got to plug the Buckhead chapter here. It's July 11th.
Oh, okay.
And you can go to whatwomenwantnetworking.com to RSVP for that one if you want to meet David.
Cool. They could go to my website at davidault.com, and Ault is spelled AULT. And there's an event tab there, and it's got my appearances and stuff. So hopefully I'll be in an area wherever you are.
Well, David, it was such a pleasure having you on the show, and I just want to thank you for not just coming on the show, but for everything you do for the children and for the adults with your center. And, you know, it's just so refreshing. And you know, when you can get some of your questions answered about spirituality and religion and these types of intangible ideas and thoughts, I think that you are, and I know that you are making the world a better place just by doing that alone. So congratulations to you. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show.
I appreciate that. Thank you again for asking me and giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. And everyone else, I thank you for listening. Also, our listeners, we wouldn't be anywhere without you. So remember, subscribe to us on YouTube. Don't miss even one show. And go to whatwomenwantradio.com for more. And we'll see you next week. Good night, everyone.
You're listening to What Women Want with Judy Goss and Kristin West, only on LA Talk Radio.